It started with a bark, not loud, not aggressive, just a playful sound coming from a small bulldog, waddling freely across the ceremonial square of Buckingham Palace. The tourists giggled. Someone pulled out a phone. And the dog's owner, young man in his 20s, gave the leash a lazy flick and said, "Go on, boy. Say hi to the soldier." The crowd thought it was cute, but what happened next wasn't cute. It wasn't funny. It was a moment that froze an entire courtyard in silence. The bulldog trotted toward a royal guard, a man in red and black, wearing a tall bearskin hat, motionless like a statue. The dog barked once, then again, and then it jumped the landing, right on the soldier's gleaming black boots. What followed was not expected, not by the tourist, not by the crowd, not by anyone who had ever watched one of those funny guard videos online. The soldier stepped forward, gripped his rifle, and shouted with a voice like a whip crack, "Control your dog, sir. Step back from the Queen's Guard." The laughter stopped, the phones lowered, and in that single second, you could feel the air shift. But this story isn't about a man yelling. It's not about a dog either. It's about something far more uncomfortable, something we've all done. Maybe without realizing it. It's about the invisible lines we cross when we treat everything as entertainment. When we think tradition is funny. When we forget that silence sometimes means sacrifice. Because here's what most people didn't know. That soldier, the one who broke protocol, he wasn't supposed to be on duty that day. He had volunteered. Why? Because it was the anniversary of the day he lost his best friend, in uniform, in combat, defending civilians who couldn't defend themselves. And today, of all days, all he wanted was to stand in silence, in memory, not to be filmed, not to be laughed at, but to honor something he could never bring back. So the next time you see a soldier standing still, eyes ahead, unmoving, ask yourself, are they cold and distant? Or are they holding something inside that the rest of us have simply forgotten to see? Respect doesn't need to be shouted. Sometimes it just means holding the leash tighter and walking away. Welcome to Tales and Truths, where every story reveals more than what meets the eye. Here, we go beyond the headlines and viral clips to uncover the real people, the hidden sacrifices, and the quiet moments of courage that often go unnoticed. Like the royal guard who took a single step forward, not out of anger, but out of remembrance. A man who stood still to honor a fallen friend, until silence was no longer enough. At Tales and Truths, we believe every uniform hides a story. Every tradition carries weight. And sometimes, a brief moment caught on camera is just the beginning of something far deeper. If you're here for stories that move you, challenge your assumptions, and remind you what respect truly means, then you're in the right place. Subscribe, stay curious, and let's look closer together. The tourist thought it would be cute. Let the dog run up to the soldier. What could possibly go wrong? He wasn't being mean. He wasn't trying to cause a scene. He was just being careless. There were dozens of people gathered that day in front of the palace. Families with strollers, teenagers posing with phones, couples holding iced coffees, smiling. It was the kind of quiet, touristy day where everything felt ordinary. The kind of day where rules start to feel like decorations, and traditions begin to look like background. That's exactly what the royal guard had become in this man's eyes. A background prop, a perfect opportunity for a bit of humor. A living statue, there to be stared at, joked about, filmed for the next viral short. The man unhooked the leash with a casual flick of the wrist. His bulldog, chubby, friendly, unaware, took off toward the soldier, tail wagging. A few people noticed and chuckled. One kid said, "Oh look, he's saying hi to the guard." Phones came up. A few giggles turned into soft laughter. It was innocent enough, right? The bulldog barked once. It circled the soldier's legs, sniffing his boots, then planted itself right in front of him, looking up, tongue hanging out, as if waiting for attention. But the soldier didn't move. He didn't look down. He didn't smile. He didn't even blink. And that's when the tone changed. The dog, not understanding the silence, barked again, this time louder, then jumped. Two little front paws landed square on the soldier's shiny black shoes, and something shifted. The air, which had been filled with light laughter and casual chatter, suddenly held tension like a string being pulled too tight. People stopped talking. One man slowly lowered his phone. Another stepped away from the edge of the barrier, as if sensing that something sacred was about to be broken. Then, the sound. A boot. Scraping against stone. A step clean, precise, intentional. The royal guard moved. He broke position. He stepped forward, one foot slicing into the silence. And then he spoke. "No," he commanded. "Control your dog, sir. Step back from the queens." Guard. It wasn't loud for the sake of volume. It was loud for the sake of clarity, like the sound of a gavel in a courtroom, or the first drop of rain before a storm. The tourist froze. He grabbed the leash, stammered something like, sorry. But the moment had already split open. The quiet humor had evaporated, and in its place was an emotion no one expected to feel that day. Shame. Not because the soldier had overreacted. He hadn't. He had done exactly what he was trained to do. But because for the first time, people realized this wasn't a man pretending to be still. This was a man choosing to be still, choosing to stand, choosing silence, because that silence means something. People started putting away their phones. One woman whispered, "I didn't even know they were allowed to speak." A little boy pulled on his mother's sleeve and asked, "Is he mad?" But it wasn't anger. It was discipline. It was dignity. And most importantly, it was a boundary, being restored in a world that had begun to blur all of them. Because when everything is filmed, when everything is content, when every tradition is just another chance to go viral, what happens to the meaning behind it? The royal guard didn't shout to intimidate. He didn't step forward to make a scene. He stepped forward because something had to. Because someone had to remind everyone that this wasn't just a tourist attraction. This was a post of honor. This was a soldier on duty. This was the living edge of a very old, very real tradition. And it deserved more than amusement. It deserved respect. The man with the bulldog quietly clipped the leash back on. The dog wagged its tail, completely unaware of what it had just triggered. The guard returned to position, eyes forward, rifle held firmly, still as stone once more. But the crowd wasn't the same. The laughter didn't return. The tone of the square had shifted. Now there was reverence. Now there was silence. Sometimes it takes a single step, a single raised voice, to remind us that even in a modern world of filters and memes, there are still places, people, and roles that demand something old-fashioned, something powerful, respect. The soldier's name was Corporal Adam Westfield, 31 years old. Tall, broad-shouldered, quiet in the way that soldiers often are, not because they have nothing to say, but because they've seen too much to waste words. Adam wasn't supposed to be on duty that day. A shift had been reassigned. His name had been rotated off the ceremonial schedule. He could have spent the day anywhere else, home, resting, or even far from London, but he volunteered. He chose to stand in full uniform under the gray sky in front of a palace gate. Because this day wasn't just another day for him, it was Jamie's day. Jamie McAllister, Adam's closest friend since basic training. The kind of friend who knew your favorite sandwich, your worst fear, your family's names by heart. They deployed together, served in Iraq together, watched each other's backs in places the world forgets as soon as headlines fade. On one mission, things went wrong. Ambush. Chaos. A family caught in the crossfire, trapped behind an alley. Jamie didn't hesitate. He stepped into the open to shield them. Adam remembers the sound, not of the gunfire, but of Jamie's body hitting the ground. He remembers holding his friend's hand, watching the light leave his eyes, and whispering, "I've got the rest of it, mate. I swear." That was 3 years ago. Since then, every year, on this exact day, Adam made the same promise to himself. I will stand. I will serve. I will remember, not in grief, not in tears, but in silence, deliberate, stoic, still, because that's what Jamie would have done. So when the dog ran up to him that morning, when its paws landed on his boots, when the tourist laughed and the crowd giggled, something inside Adam cracked. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even offense. It was the sound of sacred space being stepped on. The emotional equivalent of muddy footprints on a grave. That square was Adam's memorial ground. That silence was his prayer. And someone had just tried to turn it into content. He could have stayed still. He could have let the moment pass, but he had made a promise. And breaking silence wasn't breaking that promise. It was defending it. That's why he moved. That's why he spoke, not out of ego. Not because he felt insulted, but because Jamie's name deserved better than laughter. What the crowd saw was a guard shouting. What they didn't see was the weight of 3 tours, the weight of guilt, the weight of a memory carried in silence too long. You see, people think royal guards are statues. They forget the person inside the uniform. They don't know how much pain some of those boots have walked through, how many scars are hidden beneath perfect posture, how many stories are swallowed beneath that silence. Adam has stood in sandstorms. He's marched under sniper fire. He's held the hands of wounded civilians. And now, in London, he stands on polished stone. But the battlefield is still there in his mind. In the way he breathes. In the way he clenches his jaw when someone gets too close. For him, being a royal guard isn't a costume. It's a continuation of duty, of meaning, of memory. He once told another guard, quietly, "People think we stand here to look pretty, but I'm not standing for the tourists. I'm standing for the people who can't anymore." So yes, when the dog touched him, when laughter echoed off the palace walls, he broke protocol. He spoke. He drew a line. And in that single step forward, he gave the crowd a moment they'll never forget, even if they never understand why it happened. But now you know that it wasn't about a dog. It wasn't about disrespect. It wasn't about embarrassment. It was about honor. It was about one man keeping a promise. A soldier standing still for someone who never came home. So next time you see a royal guard, don't just look at the red coat or the tall hat. Don't just wonder if they'll flinch or smile or react. Instead, ask yourself who they might be remembering and what promise they might be keeping in that silence. Because silence isn't empty. Sometimes it holds more as ever could. The tourist later apologized. Not because someone forced him to, but because as he watched the video that night, as he saw the stillness, the stare, the quiet power behind that single step, something shifted in him. He realized he hadn't just let his dog run free. He had let his assumptions run free. Assumptions about what ceremony is, what duty looks like, and who gets to be turned into a joke. The bulldog, of course, remained blissfully unaware. It wagged its tail, curled up on the floor of the hotel room that night, completely untouched by the wave of emotion its innocent act had stirred. But online, the reaction was massive. The clip went viral within hours. Millions of views. Tens of thousands of comments. Some laughed. Some argued. Some said the guard overreacted. Some said he should have shown more tolerance. But in all the noise, in all the retweets, stitches, and captions, the real story got lost because most people saw a shouting guard, a man in red and black, tall hat, serious face. They saw the step. They heard the command, but few saw the pain behind the uniform. Few paused to ask, what makes a soldier break silence? What kind of memory lives behind eyes that haven't blinked in 30 minutes? This wasn't a man who hated dogs. He likely grew up with one, might even smile when he sees one playing in the park on a different day, in a different life. No, this was not about a dog. This was about dignity. This was about a man who carried too much to stay silent one moment longer. A man who stood not just for a photo, but for a promise, because laughter, however innocent, has the power to erase meaning, not intentionally, not maliciously, but completely. And Adam Westfield refused to let that happen. He didn't respond because he was angry. He responded because he had to, because the silence he'd chosen that day wasn't ordinary. It wasn't protocol. It was grief in uniform. And when that silence was broken, when his boots were stepped on, literally and figuratively, he answered with strength, with restraint, with a voice that didn't shake, even when the memory behind it did. You see, it's easy to forget that people in uniform are still people. It's easy to reduce them to roles, costumes, symbols, until they do something human. Like take a step, raise their voice, or hold on to a promise so deeply it becomes part of their breath. Adam's story wasn't trending. The video was. But his pain, his promise, his memory of Jamie, that lived off camera. And maybe that's why this story matters more than most. Because behind every viral moment we share without thinking, there's often a story we never take the time to ask about. So what do we do with that? Maybe it starts with looking longer, not just watching, but seeing. Seeing the quiet weight in someone's stance, the discipline it takes not to react, the years behind the silence, and maybe it means we reconsider what we find entertaining. Not to kill joy, but to protect meaning, because the world needs joy. But it also needs reverence. The next time you walk past a royal guard, don't test him. Don't poke him. Don't whisper to your friend, let's see if he moves. Instead, stand still. Look at the eyes behind the stillness. And wonder, what does this man carry? Whose name lives in his silence? And if you're lucky, you might not get a reaction. You might not get a moment for your phone. But you will witness something sacred, a man protecting not just the palace, but memory itself. So next time, hold the leash tighter. Not just on your dog, but on your impulse to turn everything into a moment for yourself. Because some moments belong to others, to the fallen, to the ones who served, to the men like Corporal Adam Westfield, who still believe that silence is service, and that honor is worth protecting, even when no one's watching. So next time you're near a royal guard, don't test him, don't taunt him, and for heaven's sake, don't let your curiosity or your camera turn him into a stage prop. That stillness you see, it's not empty, it's not passive, it's earned. Behind that unreadable expression might be a man who has stood through war, who has lost friends, who has chosen discipline when the world around him chose noise. He's not there for applause. He's not there for your social feed. He's there for something older, something quieter, something deeper. Respect is not a performance. It's a decision. You make it every time you pause, every time you choose silence over spectacle, every time you see the person inside the uniform. So, please, next time you walk by, look closer, step back, and give the moment the dignity it deserves. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply not interfere. What are your thoughts on this moment? Do you believe the Royal Guard was right to react the way he did? Or do you think the tourists simply made an innocent mistake? We'd love to hear your perspective. Share your thoughts in the comments, whether it's about respect, tradition, or how we treat those in uniform. Have you ever witnessed a moment where silence held more power than words? Let's start a thoughtful conversation below. Your voice matters, and respectful dialogue is what makes this community meaningful. So don't just watch, tell us what this story meant to you.